Well, let's get started then. Today, we're continuing our webinar series, and today we're talking about self expression really as a means of self discovery, of learning about ourselves, and how really they're both intertwined. And I'm very lucky to have on stage with me today Jeff Leifer, who's an expert in this field. Jeff Leifer is a community designer, leadership consultant, and cross cultural guide. And he's the founder of Circadian, a multi sector experience lab focused on integration and consciousness. Jeff developed an executive coaching toolkit and a cohort program for next generation leadership that truly values the health and well-being of all individuals, communities, and the planet. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Sheri.
So I just start with a personal story on why this topic of self-expression and self-discovery resonates with me. So many of you know, because you've listened to our previous webinars in the series, that I'm a cancer survivor, a very long-term cancer survivor now, close to 35 years. And one of the things is I attended some support groups when I was going through that. And one of the questions that the support group leader had asked me was to really, or asked the group to come up with, it was kind of a group project, to come up with our personal mission statements. And I thought, well, gee, that's pretty cool, because I was not working any longer. I didn't exactly have the same plan I had before I had cancer. It kind of wiped me out in my early 20s. So I thought, okay, I want to come up with this personal mission statement, because it wasn't tied to the work that I did. It wasn't tied, which might be different now that I had some limitations and things like that. So I said, okay, great. So I was all for it. So I came up with this mission statement that was pretty general, but it was pretty simple. And I still, 35 years later, live by it. And that's to know myself well enough really to be who I am in the world, and in being so, touch the lives of others. So it was pretty simple, but it gave me the chance to do it, whether I was, really officially working or not. But then I thought, oh my God, now how am I going to do this? I mean, how do I even begin to know myself well enough to then sort of be who I was in the world, which was about expressing really who I was authentically and figuring out what I wanted to contribute to that world and how I wanted to connect with people and how to be me. So it turned out to be a much more complicated mission statement than I really thought it was going to be in the beginning. So I went through a process of creative self-exploration and expression, and we could talk, if we get a chance, a little bit more what that looked like for me. But Jeff, I'm really curious, you've also been through a process of personal transformation, and you must have that personal definition of what creative self-expression means to you. And I was wondering if you would be able to share that with everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Sheri. That's a great question. There's so many directions one can go. What comes up for me right when you ask that is the larger context for me is a bit about what are my true gifts? What is mine to offer? And it's a kind of sacred reciprocity. What can I ask for from the collective intelligence and the collective nourishment of my soul from all other folks and from the universe in a sense? And then what do I have to offer so that my inward experiences and my outward experiences are actually in a kind of resonance? And that ends up being this gift to the world and to myself. I'm able to integrate all the different parts of myself and render them as whole. And when I'm inhabiting my whole true nature, there's really no limit to the expansiveness of what I can offer and how much fulfillment I can get.
Wow, that's great. I think that some people, when they saw this topic, they may think, well, this is something, self-expression has to do with art. I'm not an artist, I'm not a musician, I'm not a dancer, I'm not, all these things that we think about when we think of self-expression. But the way you define it, it's really so much broader than that. It's about being you, and it's about how to express that, not just what you want to put out there in the world, but what can you take in that adds to who you are, and that adds, and it works together, this whole way of how we define ourselves. But how do we have the courage to just be who we are? And and take that next step of being sort of out there, which was a lot what I was talking about in my experience, which was now that I decided to be out there in the world, how do I go about doing that? And I wanted to start this webinar with just a few definitions, so to speak. So with this broader definition of self-expression, I'd also like to hear how you would define sort of self-discovery or
Mm.
personal development.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe that?
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful question. And isn't it interesting, Sheri, those of us that have been, I almost said fortunate enough, but have been on the challenging path of transformation, I think we eventually feel it's fortunate and we have gratitude, which is why I think you're imparting all of your wisdom and gifts through this beautiful program and this beautiful platform. Um, and at the same time, it's not easy, right? You had such a beautiful, concise definition there, but it can also belie the challenge. And so I think self-discovery is comprised of many different aspects. And one piece is, um, can I play with and enjoy um, working with the creative material of what's alive in my heart? And that includes what is challenging. It includes some of the murky water that's harder for me to look at. Can I shape a container for an inquiry, for looking into my interior architecture, if you will, and really locating where my inner knowing and intuition is, and that dances beautifully with my mental thinking and with my ideation, my imagination. Those pieces come together in kind of an integrated guidance system where I can attune to, just like if music is really speaking to me, or if a kind of sensation of being in water or working with nature, or or simply connecting to elements of fire or water or earth or air. There's a lot to say for creating a container within which I can go into discovery. And the self-discovery allows me to have more discernment. So there's a lot of energy coming from external, from our teachers and from our learning and from our reading and from our culture. And much of it is really beautiful and inspiring. And some of it can be distracting and can be imposed on us through media and through transmissions of other kinds. So we really want to develop our own core true knowing. The roots of our system, of our heart, our mind, and our soul need to be watered and nourished so that if we get thrown off at the higher level of the tree, the roots are solid and will stay true to the path that really is unfolding for us in alignment with who we are.
So having that almost like a sanctuary, like when you're describing this place, I'm thinking of a place that you can hold that's just for you to explore some of these issues of the heart. So you said, because I think if we're going to understand like who we are, so we can put ourselves out there, the first step is to understand who we are. And like you said, that's no easy task. I mean, people spend their entire lives trying to figure that out. But if the first step is to kind of create a space for that to happen. And for every individual, it could be different. I mean, for some people, it could be a meditative walk. For other people, it could be actual meditation. For other people, it could be doing something that they find relaxing. My son was just telling me the other day, oh, Mom, I build Legos because it gives me peace. I thought that was kind of a strange thing. I would find it would certainly not give me peace reading all those directions and trying to figure out how everything works. But for him, it's a meditative practice.
Yeah. I
Like
feel the same way around marathon.
For everybody, they have their own way of defining this place where they go, for that peace, for that discovery. And sometimes it could be guided, like you said, from the outside, from questions from the outside, from workshops we do, from things that we read, from practices that we hold. And sometimes it just happens, right? It just evolves, and to create a space for that to happen, I think is super important. And I also think one other thing that resonated with me is is in this kind of special place. And what self-discovery is about is when things start to come together. Our thoughts are over here, our feelings are over here, and our roles that we play in our lives are over here. And when you come to this place where it can be, like you said, integrated, where it can um, come together for us, then we are much more likely to be able to express it. I would think that expressing ourselves doesn't mean art, doesn't even mean being out there and doing dance or anything. It could be how we talk to people. It could be the values that we hold, what paths we choose to take. All these in this broader definition of self-expression that we're talking about. Would you agree with that? That it includes
Yes.
all those different elements?
You're bringing up some points that are near and dear to my heart. One is when you said sanctuary, I like to work with people, sometimes challenge them to say, where would you build your temple? Not literally,
Oh, wow.
but as a vision to guide you. What would it look like, and what would be in it, and who are your allies? And another thing that you said so well is just about this. Sometimes it just happens. There's an allowing, and I think that the invitation is to let the normal capacities of our frontal cortex, the way we analyze, the way we strategize, the way that we really try and use linear thinking, which is so helpful for solving problems. We want to get from A to B. We can ask that capacity to rest a little bit sometimes, and to say, what would happen if I worked with my breath, and not even just my breath in my lungs, but if I lay down and just kind of had this sense that my entire body was being breathed. Sometimes when I walk in the forest, I imagine the trees breathing me instead of the other way around. And this idea that you said about interacting with people, for instance, the nature of relationships, relational learning and relational practice and relational integrity can be quite a beautiful ritual and quite a beautiful practice to say, from what place am I speaking? In my heart, in my system, is it my mind? And from what place am I listening? Again, that reciprocity, that mutuality, that relational dynamic is so important to get to know ourselves. We don't have to just go into a cave or go into a sanctuary or even a vipassana, as useful as some of those meditative retreats can be. We can actually really start to learn about ourselves through projections and reflections of our dear ones and those that were involved. And that could be animals and plants and people, not just people that were not just other humans even.
Well, what you say is so important because it's almost like we can fit in self-discovery into our regular life, right? If we don't have to, go off on a retreat or a sanctuary or a physical place, but we can create that space somewhere in our real life, and we can use the people that are in our lives to be that mirror, to be that reflection. And because we don't live in isolation. I mean, so many of us are learning that too much.
Hard,
We
yeah.
don't have to be away from one another.
But it's a good point about now. It's a very good point about this challenging time that we find ourselves in this moment. How do we utilize this opportunity, as challenging as it is, and as many people who are obviously suffering, and it's an intense, acute moment with the COVID reality. But how might we use that spaciousness, if you will? It's a little bit less external energy and external noise pulling us in directions, a little less FOMO right now. We're not wishing we were at a concert or wishing we were traveling. We're here, and we're surrendered into presence. And sometimes constraints, as you know, are a great tool for creativity. If you said, I'm going to take a camera to the desert and only use this lens, or I'm only going to paint with these three colors, that constraint sometimes inspires us to be creative in ways we might not otherwise have realized. So I think this present moment has its challenge, but has a lot of opportunity for creative expression.
Well, that's great. That's really inspiring. It makes me want to go think of what limits do I want to put on the shelf with the materials that I have at hand, and go out there and be creative and take advantage of this time and the space. And not just for people in my own life, but how can I do that with my children? How can I do that with my husband? And to take advantage of the time that we have now. It's a different twist on how we look at this, definitely. Um, Anyway, I just want to move on a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
what happens when people don't express themselves
Mm.
and don't have this opportunity to go inside and reflect and
Mhm.
be who they are when we have to be someone that we're not, for example,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
we don't lack the confidence to put ourselves out there. Um, what do you see happening in that situation?
It's such an important question, and I love that you began today's talk by saying different people have different paths. You know, we can speak to our experiences, and we impart them and we offer them to the collective, but we're waiting for everybody to share their story too. We're waiting and wanting everyone to engage with this inquiry, so that we can learn as well. There's no real guidebook, if you will. But that said, when we're not able, for whatever reason, because of wounds, traumas, restrictions, constrictions, it's kind of like the body, contraction and compression. When we're not able to have the whole system functioning as an integrated whole, we really can be paradoxically at the effect of our very own gifts. So I have these gifts that I'm born with, some that I cultivate, many that I'm given. And yet, if I'm not able to connect to them, um, actually, there's an insidious effect, there's a negative effect where they're going to kind of implode in my system because they're not moving, they're not being expressed, they're not manifesting, they're not taking shape. And so there's a kind of almost like, when you work with, say, a designer and they create like a tonal board, they'll say, here's the font and here's some of the colors, here's the materials we could work with, here's some of the choices of the shape of the object that we're going to design. We want to kind of really imagine a topography for the manifestation and expression of our true nature. What is our soul's path? What are our core values? What legacies have we inherited that inspire us? What challenges have we inherited that maybe we want to really heal and change and transform through ancestral work, etc. There's so many ways to address this question of when I can't express. There's a kind of uh, dissonance, and I can get thrown off from my true nature. And guess what will happen? The more I put in the world, that little bit of distortion will scale. So we want to find integrity at the smallest scale of who am I, what matters to me, what are my core values, what inspires me when I'm in connection with all that is. And when I find that scale of beauty, the beauty way in a sense, then when I scale as I go along my path and I offer my gifts in bigger and bigger ways, I'm scaling integrity instead of distortion.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think that if we repress those important parts of ourselves, even if we don't even realize that we're doing it, but it's a really a core value, like you said, or a core part of who we are. And we not only is it frustrating if we don't get to be who we are, but it's actually detrimental because those feelings can stay inside of us and they don't go away. They harbor, they grow, they come out in weird ways in interactions that we don't want to have with people because there's sort of this unrest that lies in all of us. And I think, especially in times like today, or when under stress for whatever brings us stress in our lives, I mean, it's more likely to not have the perfect space to be peaceful and to go through all the things that we're talking about, but it's almost the most necessary time to even start small, just find those core nuggets
That's
that
right.
hang on to, and just small little baby steps of what we can do where we can feel more true to ourselves in our daily lives. Um, because that's going to make a difference in our interactions with people and how we feel about ourselves, in our own productivity, and how we are with our kids, whatever. So I really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, Sherry. I'll just say quickly, if we have time today, at some point, we can talk about some of the practices that help us to gain awareness when we are projecting that dis-ease that is unconscious, because that's the first step, is awareness. And if we can actually withhold those projections, there's creative material there for us for self-discovery, for the inquiry, and ultimately for expression.
Okay, great. So we're going to be talking, just everyone who's joining the call now, a little more about the practical ideas of how we, right now we're kind of theorizing and talking about the importance and the vital nature of this kind of creative self-expression. But then a little bit later in the hour, we'll talk about specifics on ideas on how do we tap in, what are some creative expression ideas that we can use ourselves if we're a parent or a professional, but really, how can we also work with our teens and young adults in terms of creating that space? It's not like we have to put them through a process of creative self-expression. We have to provide an openness for that to happen. And we have to value that this is an important part of what young people should be doing now if they're struggling.
And can be fun. It can be fun.
It can be fun. And
I,
when we
I,
get to
I've
play,
done some work with my nieces that I'll share.
we can
Fun
get
stuff.
So it kind of takes me to the point of, so people, now we've convinced people, okay, it's a great thing. If you're not self-expressive, if you don't do that self-discovery, then there's going to be these awkward moments in your life or these stuck places that you might be in or whatever. So now everybody's convinced, right? Everyone's convinced. But how do we start? You've been through your own personal journey of self-discovery. I'm wondering if you could share some things that you've learned along your path.
Oh, yeah.
How do we get started?
Sure. Thank you. Gosh, let's see where to begin. Isn't it interesting that sometimes I'm the last to know a little bit about how, maybe how I've touched somebody in a good way, or how I've inspired them or had impact. And so this idea of witnessing, I think, is a powerful piece. It can be so simple as listening intently and intentionally to a friend or to a child or to a parent. So love for that theme to come through here and there. The witnessing is an important way to reflect and to offer that reciprocity, that mutuality that we've mentioned earlier. In my own case, I went through a very acute physical health issue that involved my cervical spine and created chronic pain and drove me into depression. And it was just unbearable. And I wish I could say I had the wisdom or the strategy or the idea to heal myself, or I had some great handbook, but really it wasn't that. It was really kind of out of necessity of, I was at the bottom of really my energy was depleted. And so I basically was surrendered into slowing down. In my case, just happened to be what happened. I basically went to another city where I didn't know people. I kind of lay down and did a lot of crying and a lot of breathing. And I started to use music to start to move my body in gentle ways, authentic movement, kind of like dance. And I began to explore different somatic practices that taught me that my body has a real intelligence to it that I should listen to. And combined with my mind, which is good at solving problems, I began to shape a healing path for myself. And after exploring dozens of modalities, from depth hypnosis to different kinds of yoga and acupuncture, I settled in on a little toolkit for myself, which involved dream work, looking at my dreams, which are sort of unconscious material that's ready to come into my waking awareness and be integrated. And I worked with a breath and body movement modality called Continuum, which kind of drops the body into a really quiet state so I can listen for authentic movement. And I learned that my body actually can resolve compression and contraction on its own when I get my mind out of the way and when I'm not so trying to solve the problem. with my brain, if you will. Not yet, not yet. Right now, I'm observing, I'm listening, I'm allowing, I'm opening, I'm trusting, I'm cultivating new ways of seeing, new ways of hearing, and new ways to be present without an idea of where I'm going to go or what problem I'm going to solve. And for a while, I was trying to fix the pain. It wasn't working. I kept getting in my own way. When I started letting go and trusting that I was held in a nourishing container of possibility, many possibilities, not just healing or not healing, but uncertainty became this strange ally that I had never thought before could be helpful. I had always been afraid of. That's a little beginning of, yeah.
So speaking to the times today, that uncertainty can be our ally.
Mm,
It can actually take us, we're all living in very uncertain times, right? And if we can embrace, not fight it anymore, but embrace that uncertainty can be on our side
mhm.
and can actually be an ally to take us to another place that we don't even have to necessarily think about in our heads, right? You said you had to let go of that side of yourself in order to have this new possibility of creative expression. And you mentioned your music. I'd like to hear more about that and what
Yes,
you feel like when you're playing music or writing music or
yes.
you use music personally. Is it just for the dance, or do you actually play music?
Okay. And let me say as a preface that when you said you had to let go of your mind, I just want to say how hard that can be. My father is a physicist. My brother is a physicist. I have a degree in business and have built businesses. So it's not like I'm some spiritual meditator from birth. This is a practice that takes some courage, but
Mhm.
ends up being very playful and very beautiful. So onto music. I was finding that so many words and so many ideas and so much mental material was kind of, I was raised with a premium on knowledge and intellect, and I still greatly believe in that. It's essential for helping evolve our culture. What about the evolution of my consciousness, the evolution of my heart intuition, the evolution in a sense of my soul? And I started to quiet down, and I was watering plants, and I was visiting a particular tree in nature, just simple stuff. I was I was basically tapping on a Tibetan bowl that I had received from a friend who took a trip to Nepal, and just the sound and the vibration created this kind of resonance. My whole body became like an instrument, like a cello vibrating, and I started to get even more quiet and realize maybe for a while words, even reading and social media and stimulation, what if I could just quiet my system down and listen for what the different parts of my being might be saying to me? And I liken it to having like a council table where someone's sitting at the head of the table. Maybe it's the decision maker, and then maybe there's an opportunity for the homebody to sit at the table, or the caretaker, or whatever the different aspects of my personality and energy are, to really create a balance and an integrative counsel, so that there isn't one archetypal personality energy controlling the meeting all the time. And so the sound led me into picking up instruments that I'd never played before,
Oh, wow.
string instruments, um, piano. There's a wonderful new age artist named uh, David Darling. David Darling, and he won a Grammy Award. And he used to teach in his workshops what he called Tai Chi piano. He'd
Oh,
say,
wow. Never heard
yeah,
of
he'd
that.
say, if you don't know piano, come up here. And so I went up there, and he said, play the piano. And I said, I don't know how. He said, sure you do. Do it as though it's Tai Chi, and start to work with the space, and plink and and he started to then play cello, this award-winning Grammy-winning cellist, with me playing the piano, never having touched a piano before. And it became a conversation, a listening, and a duet in a sense. It inspired me to start to play around with different instruments and to see the shapes, not only of the tone, but the negative space, to work with what's going on underneath with the intention, the energy, and the space around it, you know. So yeah, it got me out of my head and got me out of the way, and I was having fun.
Tell you what,
So
first thing that popped in my mind when you were talking about playing the piano in a Tai Chi sort of way, I remembered
mhm,
it popped in my mind to Tom Hanks and Big and how he
exactly.
starting to play, like he realized, okay, you can jump around on this floor, and it's a piano, and then like bursting and having fun with it and just really just playing a whole song. So I'm
That's
wondering
amazing.
how, when you hit that space, when it becomes fun and
Mm,
joyful and playful and you lose yourself. I mean, that
mhm.
sounds to me like the whole concept of flow. And
Yep.
I'm sure you have something to say about that because
Yes. Oh man, I'm so glad you brought it up. And there's no one universal way to talk about flow, but from I always like to say in my dream, because dreams have multiple levels of meaning. So whoever's listening, if you have an understanding of flow, an experience of flow, whether it's from uh, moving your body, whether it's from playing sports or being in a musical ensemble, as Sheri said, when you lose yourself. Yeah, Sheri, this experience of flow state, where, just to give a couple of aspects that are less obvious. One is all of my senses, my sight, my hearing, my smell, my touch, they fuse and merge in union. And so I'm no longer coming from one dominant place, like seeing with my eyes. I'm taking in stimulation and material, and then my brain is converting it into understanding and meaning making. But in this case, there's hearing, there's seeing, there's smelling, there's touching, there's opening to space all at once. And it creates this deep knowing where I'm not trying to figure anything out. I'm not assessing by touching or smelling. I'm completely in union basically with all that is. And there's a lot of intelligence when we quiet our system down and we listen in a sense with our whole body. So a flow state really has an infinite potential for expression. It's a place where I have a kind of clarity that isn't a mental clarity. Mental clarity is great and needed at times, but there's a different kind of clarity and knowing that is so reliable, that I can cultivate how to locate and connect to that place, and in the future use it as a touchstone to access when I'm feeling out of alignment, when I'm feeling small, when I am feeling sad or struggling with my challenges. I can go back to that place, invite that kind of meditative presence, and breathe into being a part of all that is and being connected to all that is. It's an amazing amount of nourishment that will bring me relief and will get me out of the stories of not being enough, out of the story of scarcity, and into the truth of abundance.
wow, that's really inspirational what you say that
Mm,
and how you
thank
could
you.
create this place and as you called it a practice or people might have another language that they use for being in a place where they can go inside and that you can return to it. It's not like you need to be stuck in it and not be part of reality in your everyday life, but we all have all these things that happen to us or that happen in our world or that we have to deal with. But if we can create a place that we can come back to where we can sort of fairly instantly get into that place where we were before, where we felt peace and connectedness. And when I think of connectedness, I don't think just, you're talking a lot about connectedness to yourself, right? Which is the first kind of connectedness,
Right.
connected to yourself at the heart level. But then when we do feel like that, connected to ourselves, can you explain how that helps us connect to other people in our life?
Yes. Oh, what a good question. And I just want to say, to your point, there's an old Zen kind of saying or koan that basically says we meet sometimes a great Zen Roshi and we think they're enlightened. and they're saying, oh, I'm still falling asleep just like you are, but I'm waking up more quickly than I used to, and you don't see it. And so maybe that's part of what you're saying about calling it back in, practicing, and maybe we fall asleep to our own true nature less and less as we go further with the path. Now, this beautiful question about how does my personal practice and connection and ultimately expression relate to connection to the collective and interconnection, which brings up all these beautiful words like interdependence. We know that's a really healthy way to relate to people. Interdependence, where I come with my whole self and somebody else comes with their whole self, and we are in relationship, but we're not going to be pulled away from the roots of our living tree by something someone says or feels about us. We can relate with them and hold it and experience it, but it's not going to pull us away from who we are. And that's why, as you said, we start with ourselves to really nourish the strong roots of being connected. And you may have heard this phrase, people and planet. And Circadian has a little one sentence, little mission statement or mantra that we use. And it goes like this: personal well-being is inseparable from planetary health. And so just to again remind us all that our agency, our potential for creative expression and for listening for where to contribute and how to be in relationship and reciprocity with each other and the planet is the key to transforming and healing all of the systems that keep our beautiful planet alive. And we are a part of it. We're of the earth. We're not at all separate from it. We know that intellectually, but how do we practice that, which is what you're getting at, so that emotionally and in the deepest parts of our soul, we experience it. We experience ourselves as part of the larger cosmos. And one way to think about it is nested systems, which is an idea that comes out of a field of research called systems thinking, systems design. And I'll just say very quickly, imagine that I'm a system, and then I live within a larger system of my family, and they act as a system in a sense, and they live within a larger system of their community, and they live within a larger system of perhaps the region of the world that they reside in, and they live within a larger system of the earth, our planet, and that lives within a larger system of the cosmos, as Neil deGrasse Tyson might say. And so when we think about these nested systems, we think, wow, really? I'm connected all the way. So who I am and what I'm up to actually scales up and back. That's like a supple membrane of intelligence and information. And it may sound to the mind a little bit woo-woo, but it actually is grounded in science. And when we learn about networks like the mycelial network of mushrooms that lives under the earth and helps a tree when the tree is damaged by fungus, by disease or by a lightning strike, this fungus network of mycelium or mushrooms has a neural network, and you can watch the movie Fantastic Fungi, and it talks about this. Yeah. So these nested systems are a way for us to really cultivate more deeply the connection that you're pointing to, which is people and planet. And I think it's a very rewarding way. We get more almost than we give in a way when we engage with transforming the ways that the planet is alive, and how to participate in that.
So if I had to wrap up everything that we've been talking about, this first part of the hour is really connecting with ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings. If we can do that, we can express ourselves. And for people, that's many different ways. Everything from talking to what we choose, how we choose to spend our time, to artistic self-expression, which is of course another, to musical, and on and on. Now I'd like to get really practical and switch gears a little bit and talk about the fun and the play, and what you've tried with young people, particularly teens or young adults in your life. How can we take some of these kind of esoteric topics that we've been talking about and really bring it home? Like, what is there a toolkit or anything like you had for yourself in going through process that kids
Mm,
and parents and those professionals who work with young people can take in for themselves and practice.
Thank you, Sheri. Okay, so let's come up with some suggestions. Let's talk about dreams for a second.
Okay.
Okay, everybody dreams 6 to 8 times a night. Not everybody remembers their dreams, but there are little fun ways to practice remembering just a little piece, what we call a fragment. And that includes having a journal by your bed,
Okay.
or a little tape recorder on your phone, a little voice memo.
Yep.
And even if you only think of something like blue spoon or monkey, those little fragments in a dream journal over time can be a fascinating um, thing to look back at and to work with as creative material. So one of the things I've done that my niece, who's a teen, has participated in and loved is a little dream circle where we basically set a date that we're all going to get together and we're going to share some dreams. Now, strangely, when you do that, you start remembering more dreams. So if you put on your date, call Sheri on Friday to chat with her about my dreams, there's a good chance before Friday I'm going to start remembering some things.
Hmm.
It's really funny how intentionality works like that.
Hmm.
And when we share a dream, we work with a particular practice that was pioneered by an amazing teacher named Jeremy Taylor. And I think what we'll do is put a link in later, Sheri, to Jeremy Taylor's book, The Wisdom of Your Dreams,
All right.
because we don't have time to get too deeply into it. But what we do is in short, we inhabit each other's dreams. So I say in my version of Sheri's dream, here's what's happening. And then I make it my dream. So
Hmm.
I'm not analyzing anybody. I'm not interpreting anybody. I'm not giving up my power, even to a talented professional like a therapist. I am working with my dream material. And when I share a dream, others have an opportunity to work with my dream as their own. And then as we share our experience of that dream, the dreamer, like Sheri, would then have an aha, like, wow, that never occurred to me. Or you will have a resonance or a frisson or a real direct experience at the felt level of the body with something someone else is saying. And that's because we need to project with others in order sometimes to see the meaning of our own dream. And then we have a chance to integrate that material into our waking awareness, because here's some of the really simple things about this method. Dreams always come to tell you something new. So if you think I've seen that dream or I know what it means, look again and listen, because it always comes to tell you something new in the world of Jeremy Taylor's projective work.
Hmm.
Dreams always come in service to health and wholeness, even a nightmare, to get our attention, to bring healing. There are multiple levels of meaning of all dreams. So every dream has more than one meaning. So, what a fantastic technology or practice to learn how to hold paradox. Paradox is really tricky. It's like, this is one thing I want to do, but this is another thing I want to do. How do I reconcile them? And in the Western world, we're not really in our culture very practiced at holding paradox. And paradox has within it very reliable truth. When you're facing a paradox, you can almost bet you're on the right path. And another part of the multiple levels of meaning is, oh, so even though I'm sick right now, like I was in my journey, or even though I'm facing health challenges, there's more than one possible outcome here. It's not just I might heal or I might not heal or I might heal in this way. There's multiple possible futures. How can I draw, dance, sing, express, play with, dramatize all these possible futures and give life to them, put them on an altar, put them in a journal, uh, create a little theater play with my nieces. In the dream circle, my nieces had an opportunity to really lean into these dreams and share their experience of being in high school, even though it was a dream from an adult. And so we had a lot of fun with that. Another thing we did with my nieces that was really special is there's a ritual. Indigenous populations in ancient cultures and Native American cultures do things called earth honoring ritual, where you make an offering to the earth to create and deepen your connection to the earth. It might be a tree, it might be with fire, it might be with water and the ocean. but a little bit of intentionality and creating a little container, and some witnessing and some offering, like we do when we have a rite of passage, like a marriage celebration or a birthday. We have a ritual, and we mark time that way. And so what we did with my nieces was I took all these herbs like calendula and peppermint and rosemary and fennel and mint and
Mm.
tobacco and all these plants. And I took a big piece of construction paper, and and in the ancient traditions, they used children's candy and sometimes even a little piece of hair, or as an offering. And my nieces then put it all in this beautiful uh, image, like a mandala, like a sand painting from Nepal, with all these herbs interacting in this. And each person comes and offers a little way of putting it on the paper, and it's this beautiful picture, if you will, a representation of what I'm feeling in my heart right now about the inspiration I'm getting from the earth, because we're in nature now. We're in the forest or in your backyard. We were doing it in my backyard. And then we lit a fire, and we said a little, kind of a little prayer, in a sense of gratitude. And then we folded this big construction paper full of all these candy and herbs and offerings. And the kids put it in the fire, and we sang a song of thanks. So that's another
Real
thing that,
question, how did it
yeah,
smell?
it smelled so amazing. So
Really?
you had thyme, and you had tarragon, and you had ashwagandha, and you had lemon balm, and you had hawthorn. And when it went up, it was like, just an ambrosia of flavors and smells.
Well, you are the coolest uncle on earth.
We had fun.
It sounds amazing. Definitely a twist on baking the s'mores out there, by the way.
Totally.
No, but you bring up mandalas, and that's certainly a technique that art therapists learn, and therapists in general, which is
Mhm,
pretty simple. And there's many, lots of information if you just search. If
mhm.
parents or healthcare or educational professionals are listening, just to search for mandalas, there'll be lots and lots of ideas.
Great
You
idea.
don't have to go to the extreme of getting herbs that we don't even necessarily know what they are, but the process of doing it. And what I really loved about that story, Jeff, is that it was something that was done together, right?
Yeah.
So this
And
type
from my
yeah,
kitchen, it was
exactly.
just,
It
yeah,
can be, right in your own home. It can be
yeah,
right with those people that, that you've been with, maybe stuck in your home all this time.
totally.
And it's a new way, it's a playful way to see a different side of somebody even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one is just storytelling.
Yeah.
We sometimes sit in a circle, my nieces and I, and one of us starts a story, and then the next person continues it. But
Mm.
we usually have like a intention, a prompt, and it almost always involves magic. It almost always involves something that came from sometimes we take the dreams that we were talking about in a dream circle, and we bring them into a story, and we make a narrative story starting with the dream. So the dream might have been something about flying, and then we just finish it, kind of like one of those beautiful Miyazaki animated movies like Spirited Away
Mhm.
or Howl's Magic Castle, which are beautiful movies, for teens, about creative expression and about a path of healing. And so that's a really fun thing, is kind of doing storytelling. I've also had fun working with tarot decks, just as a way to remember not everything always has to come from my brain. Sometimes there's a
Mhm.
randomness. I used to have a shamanic teacher, and he'd say, Jeff, when you spill a candle accidentally, or when you spill some tea, or when you drop something, your instinct is just to clean it up. That's just human nature. And he's saying, what if you took a moment and you just sat back and looked at the mess as a design, maybe as a reminder that you weren't being mindful, maybe as something that isn't wrong or bad, but a practice of being more connected to everything that we're doing. So that maybe when someone hands you a glass of water, you take a moment. Maybe for 1 month, you say, I'm going to just take a moment every time I receive a glass of water, and I'm going to connect to that element of water that I'm made up of, mostly water. And in that continuum breath work, modality that I mentioned earlier, the idea is that I'm made up of fluid. All living things are made up of fluid, and there's a resonance between living things. And for those of you that like to talk to your plants or your pets, you might know what I'm talking about. There's
Exactly.
ways to communicate. Yeah.
And you talk about storytelling, which like is a form of narrative, right? So is writing, narrative writing. And I just think, with my team at Digging Deep in Shadows, that sometimes we have these things called brain dumps where we
Okay.
just write whatever we can because that's where a lot of creative ideas come out of. And,
Love
we
that.
can judge them, we could think about them, afterwards. We can put values on certain things, but the importance is to let that flow, to get it out on paper. And
Wow.
um,
That's it. That's it. That's the key to flow
and it
right
could
there.
be, we call it, it's interesting though, now that we've been talking about turning off our brain, that we call this a brain dump. But it could be easily rethought of that same exercise as being like in a heart dump, right? Like if we say,
Yeah,
write something about emotions that we're experiencing
that's
and
true.
want to get them on the paper and not judge them first. And you can always go back and reread it and say, oh, this is the part that resonates most with me, or oh, I don't know why I said that. That's really not.
Right. I like brain dump also. Maybe we start with a brain dump so we can kind of clear out and get that down. And then maybe we go to the system dump, and I kind of like that.
Gets down to the heart level. Well,
Yeah.
there's another idea, and I'm sure that there's many more to come. And just what you were saying about having fun with it. I mean, when I think of the type of work that I do with young people, when I think of expression, I mean, the most basic thing, having two kind of preteen teens myself, is what clothing are they wear? What color is their hair going to be today? How can they express themselves?
That's
And
right.
mom and dad get out of the room, so to speak, so that they can have their own style. They're like, well, you don't. That's your style, mom. But we have our style, and
That's
this
good parenting.
is. And even though, like, just this 2 days ago, my daughter decided to shave the back of her head and have a design in the back, and
There you go.
so the conservative mom's like, okay, well, as long as your hair covers over the part that's expressive of yourself. She's, well, I'm never going to wear my hair down. I cut it off so I could have this. And I'm like, yeah, well, we're going on a trip with your grandparents next week. But,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, it's funny because we always want to, it's hard for me to step back and not
I love what you're saying.
to have that control. But
Yes.
what they're saying is just let me be me.
And I love what you're
And
saying
young
because it's
people, that's how they start to express
that's
themselves.
it. And you're in relationship. And so you're discussing it, you're sharing it with each other. And it's not like it must be this way, it must be that way. I think that you're supporting them to find their voice, but also you're part of the larger container of support. And so it's how to get out of the way, but also provide support. That's the paradox. And that's why it's truth.
I think that's a great place. We're going to need to wrap up here shortly, but that dance that you're talking about, how when we support each other, it could be our spouse, it could be our children, right? Because we're all in this dance together.
That's
And
it.
how can we notice when people are trying to be self-expressive and allow that to happen? I think
Yeah.
so often we're ready to make a comment when maybe we don't have to make a judgment kind of comment. It could be
It's
just a
well
very
said.
open kind of comment to invite more if they're sharing something, if they're sharing a part of themselves, or if they're just being expressive. I think the dance is an interesting challenge. We could have a whole nother webinar
Yes, we could.
how to dance with people and the give
Yes.
and take and all of that. I think that it's this merging, like you were saying. I heard you say several times. It's the integration. It's the merging of maybe the emotional and the logical sides of ourselves. It's not like we really have to turn off one to have
No.
the other live. They're both part of our identity, right? And you have
Yes.
to, I think it's easier to do that logical side of things because so much of what we practice every day, every day, taps into that side of who we are. So that's kind of our overdeveloped side, shall we say.
That's right.
And
That's right. I would just say one sentence on that, which is yes, let those parts dance with each other. And then when we go outward
Yeah.
away from, to the collective, let's try and meet each other where we are first before judging and thinking that we understand. I think you summed it up.
Well, thank you. And like I said, certainly this whole self-discovery and self-expression process has a lot more to doing than just being an artist or just being what maybe the rest of the world talks about as being a creative
It's our
person.
birthright. It's our human birthright.
Who's creative, right? It's how we're all creative.
Hmm.
We all have that spirit inside of us, and it's really about how do we let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. How do we nurture that, and then how do we release it out there, so
Yeah,
that
and support each other.
with us. And I think it is such a powerful, like you said, healing tool. It's also a tool for self-discovery and understanding ourselves so that we can be who we are in this world. And it's with that, I'm just going to wrap it up and say thank you. We will be sending out recordings of the webinar if you missed any parts of it and would like to review it. And we'll be available. We also have, we'll be sending a short list of resources if you want to explore this further. And until we meet again, this is a very hectic time as we're meeting holidays, and nobody knows how those are exactly going to happen. They will happen in one way, shape, or another because it's in us to celebrate life together, and whether that's together physically or over Zoom or just in each other's hearts. And I just encourage everyone to think about what we've talked about as they start making their plans for the new year and how they want to be in that new year. And I know all of our circumstances are different. Some of us are facing very challenging times right now, either with ourselves or with our family members or people that are close to us. And I think if there's any of this information that we provided that helps you find that space where you can nurture yourself, where you can tap in to a side of yourself that maybe you haven't before, that will help you through those challenging times, we just encourage you to do it. And thank you, Jeff, for being my guest today.
Great pleasure. A great pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. And please, I encourage everyone who's listening, if you know somebody that this webinar can help, please consider forwarding it to them, because that's what we're here. We're here at Digging Deep in Shadow's Edge Projects to really reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help on that.